What's up, guys? Here on a Friday night, just recorded a podcast episode. Brandon, how's it going? How'd the podcast feel? How'd the
The
episode
podcast
feel?
was good. I mean, it's only a couple minutes ago, but yeah,
Yeah,
it
yeah,
felt good.
yeah. Gonna get a quick reaction in for the Clips channel while we're here. Cowherd came out with a top 10 players remaining in the NBA playoffs. We're gonna react to it. Uh, he starts off the clip. I mean, I'll play it, but he starts off the clip. I'll just play it. How about that?
Yeah, we'll do that.
I don't have Giannis in my top 10 most valuable.
All right. I mean, I'm just gonna stop there. That's what I wanted to say. We'll get into it. It's only players remaining in the playoffs. I'm gonna say that. So there's no LeBron. Let's get into it. And just tell me when to stop if you want to say anything.
Yeah.
I'll give you my list. Tell me where I'm wrong.
Number one.
Kevin Durant. 32 a game, 55% shooting. He is unstoppable. He is the greatest.
I think we could pause after every player and so that we
Yeah.
could talk about it. But yeah, I mean, I guess we have to see. Obviously we know the other players who are still in the playoffs, but yeah, I mean, I think Durant's number one. I mean,
He's my number one. He has to be. There's no.
He's the best player. He's the best player in the playoffs who's still left. I think you could honestly make the case right now he's the best player in the world. He's honestly been playing like that. After game 3, maybe not. That wasn't a great performance, but he's still been playing like one of the best players in the world, if not the best player in the world. So, yeah, I think number one is a perfect spot for Durant.
Agreed. We're going to have to see what 2 through 10 is, but I think that's where it's going to get exciting.
6'11 and a half, 7-foot offensive player that's not back to the basket. I mean, he's Dirk Nowitzki, but significantly better. He's the best player left. He's the most valuable player. Let's be honest. He gets hurt, they're not winning the championship. James Harden is missing, and they're blowing the Bucks out. So when it comes to postseason, I like Harden, but Harden has never been a great postseason player. KD, unlike Harden, does not need the whistle. He needs a ball and a hoop. He's the MVP right now in the playoffs.
Number two.
Kawhi Leonard, mid-range.
Yeah, he'd be my number 2 as well. I know you may even disagree with this, but to me, he's my number 2.
No, I think he's number 2. I think when he's on and he's performing at a level that he should be performing at, like we saw in game 6 and 7 of the Dallas series, I think he is the second most valuable player who's still left in the playoffs. But his performances like he did in game 1 and game 2 against the Jazz, he is somewhat inconsistent. At least I don't know if it's just this year. Obviously, 2019 he wasn't. 2020 again somewhat was. So I don't know what it is, but when he's on, he is the second best player and the second most valuable player. There is a difference between best and valuable, but he's both, and it's both behind Kevin Durant. So yeah, I think again, perfect spot, number 2.
To me, if he's definitely the second best in my opinion. I think you can also argue he's the most valuable, though. I don't know that Durant's the most valuable. If you want to talk valuable, just because I don't necessarily agree with Colin that if Durant's not on that team, the Nets don't win the finals. I definitely wouldn't pick them to win the finals. But Kyrie and Harden, I mean, that's as good of a duo as pretty much as there is remaining in the league. That's left in the playoffs. So as far as value, I don't know that Durant is the most valuable. As far as like, just chance to win the finals with when he's on the team and when he's not. But sure. I mean, I think Durant 1, Kawhi 2 is good for me.
Game doesn't have the three-point ability of KD, but he's a better defender than KD. And KD plays defense. Give KD credit. He'll play defense. But Kawhi doesn't have the offensive range of KD, but he's a better defensive player. And we saw what he did to Luka at the end of that series, so Kawhi too.
Number 3.
Okay, Chris Paul. I'm sorry. Phoenix had the worst record in the NBA.
No.
Yeah.
I'll let you start, but this is.
Yeah, I think this is media bias right here. I think I'm pretty sure you agree also with me, and you're way more on it than I am. But yeah, I don't think he's number 3. Is he top 10? He's definitely top 10. There's no doubt about that. But he's not number 3. There's no way. I mean, we saw in that Lakers series he was 70%, 65% of what he was in the regular season because of that shoulder injury. And they still won in 6 games. Now, you could say a lot of it, it was because of Anthony Davis and the Lakers' problems, but they were doing pretty well without Chris Paul, and he barely scored. I don't even think he scored double digits. I think he scored double digits in 1 or 2 games in that series. So it's not like they really needed him in those games, and they still won in 6 games against the defending champs. So he's definitely not number 3. Is he top 10? Yes, but I think he's 7, 8, 9, 10. I don't think he's number 3.
He's not number 3. He's not even the best player on his own team, in my opinion. You can argue it, but he's not number 3. I'd have Giannis on this list above Chris Paul. I know for some reason Cowherd doesn't have Giannis in his top 10, which valuable or best is wrong. But no. And people want to talk about how Chris Paul is so underrated, but when the whole media is riding this Chris Paul train, like, he's not underrated anymore. That's when he becomes overrated. The same thing happened with Westbrook, happened with Melo too. Westbrook, there was a period when Westbrook was overrated, and then right as people started called him overrated, he became pretty underrated in my opinion. I think the same thing happened with Melo. I think there was a long period where I thought Melo was super overrated, and then I thought he was going to be underrated, but then he kind of never really was because he kind of fell off when he went to OKC. Never really happened, but yeah, he's not number 3. And I don't even necessarily hate Chris Paul. I know I've said it, but I don't hate Chris Paul. When we even talked about our top 5 point guards in the podcast, go watch the podcast, most recent podcast episode. But we talked about top 5 point guards of all time. I was more favorable on Paul than Brandon was. But no, Paul's not 3. We both agree on that. We'll move on.
NBA the previous 5 years. You take him off this roster, it's a bunch of kids. They're not playing anymore. I think he's the most underrated player in the NBA, not point guard, the most underrated player in the NBA in 20 years.
God.
I mean, Stockton got love. Magic got love. Isaiah got love. Steph gets love. Find me a point guard. He's like a quarterback in the NFL. That's a Hall of Famer that doesn't even get nominated this year for an MVP vote. I mean, give me a break. By the way, second best record in the NBA. For 11 years, they didn't make the playoffs and just blew by the Lakers.
Number 4.
James Harden. Now, I like Harden, but he's not playing right now, so I'll put him at 4.
Well, one thing I want to say before, he did get voted for MVP, so I don't know what he's talking about.
You talking about Paul?
Yeah.
How many votes did he get? Like 2? 1?
He got, in total, he got 139 points, which was...
Oh, but how many first place votes? Because I know Jokic got like 91 of the 100 or
He
something.
He got 2, which was the second most behind Curry's 5.
I don't know then. I don't know.
So,
Paul's lying.
He's... Maybe he meant something else, but I don't think he did, but... that just didn't make any sense. But Harden at 4, I don't know if I agree with him at 4. I think as we saw, he got injured, and they still won the first 2 games pretty handily against the Bucks, and they almost won Game 3 and had a pretty good shot at winning Game 3. They're up 3 points with under a minute left. So I don't know if I agree with him at number 4. Now, maybe for a championship, possibly, because obviously, James Harden is a top player in this league, but I think there's other guys. Again, not having Giannis on this list doesn't make sense. I know there's a couple guys who are going to come up. I won't say their names, just not to spoil anything. But I just don't think he's number 4. Is he top 10 for sure? But I just don't think he's number 4.
Is he top 4 on this list for best? If you want to go as far as best, maybe, sure. I don't disagree. I think Harden's a great player. I think I'd have him over Chris Paul for sure. Most valuable? No, we've seen how valuable Harden's been. He just hasn't been valuable yet. Maybe he will be in the finals. We'll see. But the Nets would probably still be the finals favorite without Harden. If Harden was not on this team, they would probably still be the finals favorite, just because they have the best player left in the playoffs and maybe even in the world right now.
The other thing I'll say, we know James can score. He's a little dependent on the whistle. So that's why I think KD in the playoffs is more valuable than Harden is. Harden was more valuable in the regular season than KD was. Also, Harden this year has really been impressive. His distribution numbers are through the roof. So James Harden has done something I really appreciate. He sensed the room, smart enough to see, hey, they don't need all my scoring. What they need is my distribution here too. And he's done it. So Harden, I have it 4.
Number 5.
And I think that's a fair assessment. I think Harden's been much more, willing to not be the number 1 and average 35 points a night, which I agree. I also appreciate because I was huge on that as well. Harden is a ball hog. He was in that same Melo territory where I just couldn't stand how much of a hog he was, and he didn't make people around him better. In the Nets, he's done the complete opposite.
Well, the one thing I'll say to that, and using the comparison between Melo and Harden, is that Melo wanted to do that. And in Harden's case, the team wanted him to do that. That was the whole philosophy behind that team was to have him kind of like a Luka situation where it's one guy dominate. He either shoots, gets fouled, or passes, or does a lob. So I mean, I don't think he really had a choice because that was the way they wanted to play, and that's the way that they did win. They were very successful that way. So I think if you were to do it again, he probably wouldn't choose that way, honestly. Even though it led to 36 points per game and MVP and everything, I don't think he'd choose that way. I think he'd choose like he was in 2015 when he was 28. I think he was 28, 8, and 7, I think he was. And he should have won MVP that year, but they gave it to Curry. I think that is the true James Harden and not what we saw in Houston from 2016 to 2019.
I think he probably would have liked to be this version of Harden earlier. I still think there's a series in time where he'd like to have his stretch of 36 MVPs and stuff like that. But yeah, we'll see 5 here.
Not Kyrie, Donovan Mitchell. Donovan Mitchell's the only.
Mitchell at 5. I mean, value, I think you could argue higher. I think you could, because without him on the Jazz, they're not beating the Clippers in this series. They don't have a number 1 scoring guy. They don't have, you know what I mean? Because their best player without Mitchell would be Gobert, and they wouldn't be the 1 seed. They'd probably be a first-round exit for sure if they were playing any team with a Lillard or any team that has a number 1 that can score the ball. So value, I think he's probably higher. Best, I'm going to have to see the rest of the list because he's not better than Harden. In my opinion, he's better than Chris Paul, but I mean, we've talked about Chris Paul. I'd have to see the rest of the list to see if he deserves 5 for best.
Is this list best or valuable?
The title says best.
Yeah.
He said valuable, so you could take it either way. I've been covering both I've been covering both.
Yeah, I'm assuming valuable just because, obviously if you're going by best, then you wouldn't have Paul at 3. So I'm going by valuable. And this was one of the guys who, when I was talking about Harden, I was saying there's probably 2 guys who should be in front of Harden, who I'm just not going to say, and one of them was Mitchell. I think he could honestly be above Paul. I think he could be a true number 3 in this list. Exactly what you said. Without him, this Jazz team, they probably struggle against the Grizzlies, honestly. They probably win that series because they are better, but they probably struggle a lot more than they did. You saw in game 1 when he didn't play, they lost, so clearly that shows really what you need to know. This series, if there was no Mitchell, they would have no chance of winning this series, honestly. He put up 45 or 46 game 1 and 37 game 2. That's why they won. So I think you can make a really good case of him being number 3. And if they make a finals run, it's solely because of Donovan Mitchell, honestly. So yeah, I think number 3 is a good spot for him. I think he's a little too low in this list.
I would agree.
Only active player to average 20 points a game in the playoffs each of the first 4 years in the NBA. So he was good when he came into the league, but he's also a very willing defender. He is also the team leader. So they don't have a second scorer on this team that can give you 25 a night guaranteed. He's incredibly important to this team. He'll lock you up defensively. He's got leadership skills. He's good late in games, and he's a great offensive player.
Number 6.
Now, Kyrie's a greater offensive player, but Kyrie emotionally.
Well, one thing I'll say just before you talk about Kyrie is that defensively, Donovan Mitchell is not good defensively. I think that's one of the things against him is that he's not good defensively. So I don't know exactly what he's talking about there, but I'll let you go on Kyrie being at number 6.
Well, I don't know that I agree with he's not good defensively. I think we'll have to see the top 10 players in this list, but I think he's probably on the upper half of these top 10 players defensively. He's not Kawhi, but I think he's definitely better than like a Kyrie or pretty much any point guard. But Kyrie at 6, to me, I'm not going to disagree with Kyrie at 6, but I am going to disagree with having all 3 Nets in the top 10. If we're speaking value, that's pretty much impossible in my mind because this team is still probably the favorites in the East if you remove one of any of these players. Maybe with the exception of Durant, but even then it's still debatable. If you remove Durant, Kyrie and Harden is still a pretty solid duo, and they could probably go pretty far in the playoffs, maybe even make it to the finals. If you remove Kyrie, Durant and Harden are probably still making it to the finals. If you remove Harden, Kyrie and Durant are probably still making it to the finals. So to me, if you're going value, no. If you're going best, then Kyrie at 6, I'm fine with more or less. I think Kyrie's a better player than Chris Paul. I know that Chris Paul's a better leader for sure. He's probably better defensively as well, even at age, 35 he is, 36. So, yeah, I don't know. Value, I wouldn't have Kyrie at 6. Best player, I think 6 is acceptable, but I'd have him above Paul, so I'd maybe even have him at 5. I'd have to see what 7 through 10 is, but yeah.
Yeah, valuable. I don't have him at 6. I probably have him 8, 9, 10. Again, there's still one guy I'm thinking of who should be higher on this list than what he's going to be, it looks like. But yeah, I do agree that you can't have 3 guys on the same team be top 6 valuable wise, because that just it doesn't really make sense, because then like they're not, like if you were to take one of them away, they're still making to the finals at the minimum, I'd say. So I don't exactly know how valuable a Kyrie could be if a Harden and KD led team could still win the finals, somewhat easily, honestly, I could say. So I don't exactly agree with Kyrie at 6.
Yeah, there's definitely a few players I'm thinking of. It's just so hard to have 3 players of the same team on a top 10 most valuable when there are so many other players or teams that don't have one player on this list yet. When I know for a fact if you removed, I'm not going to spoil it, but if you removed a certain player from a certain team who's playing a pretty good team, yeah, I guess it's hard to pinpoint what player I'm talking about. But I'm gonna continue, and I don't agree with the 3.
Actually, sometimes
3
doesn't show up, and defensively, he's a liability. The one thing I'll say about Kyrie, we all know he's a great finisher. The dude does not turn the ball over. Go look at the last 5 games. To handle the ball as much as Kyrie and never turn it over tells you how much control and skill he has offensively. But you can attack him defensively. You can't Donovan Mitchell at all.
Number 7.
The Joker out of Denver. Listen, he's the only player in the
Yeah, I mean, this is where
postseason.
This is the guy that I was thinking of. I thought he should be top 5 pretty easily. I mean, again, you take him off the Nuggets, they're not competing, especially with Murray being injured. I mean, your next best player is Porter, and he's very inconsistent, as he's shown in the second round against the Suns. So I don't agree with him being at 7. I mean, to have a guy like Kyrie over him, a guy like Harden over him, I guess you can somewhat make a case there, but I don't agree with that. The MVP this season, clearly the best player on that team. Without him, they're not that good, honestly. So, yeah, I don't really agree with that.
This is where you get into a tricky territory, but you could argue Jokic. I think Jokic has to be top 5. He's more valuable than Paul, in my opinion. He's more valuable than any of the Nets singularly. If you took one of them off the team, he's not more. You could argue he's more valuable than Durant, just in the case that if you took Durant off the team, Harden and Kyrie are still probably, if they're not winning this Bucks series, they're still competing. No Jokic, they're done. I mean, they're a first round exit. They lose to the Blazers in like 5. So I don't know. I would have Jokic much higher on this list. I think Jokic is the guy that the media tends to kind of underrate. If you want to talk about underrated, when we were talking about Paul, I think Jokic is a guy that the media definitely underrates. And I know he just won the MVP, so how underrated is he? But the big guys like the Stephen A's, Skip Bayless, Shannon Sharp, all these guys. But I would agree with you. Too low.
Giving you 30 and 10. So he's a point center. He's the best passing big man in the NBA. You have to go back to Bill Walton or Arvydas Sabonis. He's incredibly valuable. He's okay on the defensive end. He's not great. He's okay. They don't have any of their guards. So they got 3 guards not available. So it's now really leaning on him. And there are limitations. He never looks in good shape. I know he's a pro athlete. He is. But he looks worn down a little bit last night late.
Number 8.
Trey Young. Folks,
I mean, didn't he kind of make the case for Jokic to be higher on his list right there by saying that they have no guards, so everything's on him? I mean, didn't he kind of make the case against his own point?
Yeah, no, 100%.
But I guess Trey Young at 8. Yeah, I mean, again, he's probably. I mean, it's kind of a weird situation because I think their team as a whole is very talented. So if he wasn't on the team, would they get by the Knicks? I think they still would. The Sixers series, it looks like they're probably going to go down 2-1, and they probably wouldn't win it anyways. So, he's definitely still very valuable. He's top 10, 100%. Is he top 5? Probably not. So I think probably, 6, 7, 8 is probably a good range for him. So I don't really have a problem with him being at 8. I guess you can make the case for maybe 6 or 7, but I think it's a pretty good spot for him.
Yeah, no, I think he should probably be. It's tricky because, how do you want to handle the Nets players? Would you have him above Harden? Obviously, Harden's a much better player. Kyrie's a better player, but, I mean, Trey Young's he's the only, number 1, if you want to call Young a number 1, but he's the only number 1 quality player on the Hawks. It's not close. on the Nets, you have 3 number ones. So I think
Yeah.
inherently Young is more valuable, but sure. I think 8's fine. I'd have him probably slightly higher. I'd probably have him 6 through 8. But 8's fine. I'm not going to argue it. We'll see what he has to say.
What do you want to say? The kid is not only carrying a team. Who's the third best player for the Hawks? Seriously. We're in the playoffs. You can name the third best player for every team left. Who's the third best player for the Hawks?
Well, I mean, I can probably name. It's either Bogdanovich, Collins, or Capella.
I think it's Collins. I think Bogdanovich is their clearly second best player, and I think Collins is the third best player.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't get it. I'm just saying with that, I just don't know his point on who's. I don't know. I don't know. I think all 3 of those players are pretty good. But anyways.
Yeah.
And he's a great road player. So he's a showman. Most young players shrink on the road in the playoffs. Not Trey Young. He's better on the road in the playoffs. I mean, that is a testament to his confidence and his skill.
Number 9.
Devin Booker. Again, you'd say Devin's better.
Well, I mean,
I want to listen to what he has to say, honestly.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think he's about to say that, he's better than Paul, but yeah.
Than Trey, but Devin Booker could not carry it. Devin Booker, again, you'd say Devin's better than Trey, but Devin Booker could not carry his franchise to the second round of the playoffs without Chris Paul. Devin's a great player. Now, the West is tougher than the East. He's a tremendous offensive player. He'll body up defensively. Not a great defensive player, but he.
I mean, I don't really agree with that argument that Booker couldn't lead his team to the second round of the playoffs by himself and he was kind of comparing him to Trey there because, last year and the last 2 years, the Hawks have had, I think, the third worst record combined. It's at least top 5 worst record in the NBA combined. So before they got all the additions this offseason, it's not like they were doing anything either. The Suns were at least making more progress than the Hawks were. So I don't agree with that argument that Booker couldn't lead his team by himself to the playoffs or even the second round because it's not like Trey Young exactly is doing that either. I know he is the best player and the most valuable player on that team, but they have a lot of really other good players on that team who are making big contributions also. So I don't really agree with that argument. I think if you maybe had another argument, maybe I'd agree with that one. But with specifically that one, I don't think that exactly implies for a Devin Booker situation.
I agree. I think Colin, I don't agree with Colin at all. I think if Devin Booker was on that Hawks team, I think he'd be I think he would have been more than good enough to beat the Knicks in 5 like Young did. I think he'd be more than good enough to take a game from the Sixers like Young did. So I don't agree with that. I think Devin Booker is probably a better player than Young in my opinion, and probably more valuable if he was in a Young scenario. And this is kind of where I think Devin Booker kind of gets underrated because Chris Paul's gotten all of this credit for making the Suns from a garbage team to a great team. Let's not forget the fact that this Suns team has been a young team for 3 years. Ayton has been, he ever since his rookie year, he's continued to develop. Mikal Bridges as well. Other players in that team. Booker obviously has gotten better too. And they were 8-0 in the bubble. Let's not forget they were 8-0. And I'm not saying they were a great, a contender or anything, but they went 8-0 in the bubble. They were a team that, with or without Paul, I would have had them probably in the beginning of the year, we had them in our 7, 8, 9, 10 seed. With or without Paul, I probably still have them in that gap. I think with Paul more on the 7 side, without Paul more on the 10 side, and they were obviously much better. But I don't think Paul deserves the credit from getting them from a 11 seed in the West to the 2 seed. I think it's Paul and Booker and Bridges and Ayton's development and Monty Williams coaching. That's my opinion. Unless you have anything else to say.
No, I 100% agree.
He's got pride. He'll play some defense. He also had 47 points in the closeout game against the Lakers. I love that. It was a stand-up moment. Step on the throat of the Lakers. He did 47 points, so he is number 9.
Number 10.
Joel Embiid. Say what you want. He's the closest.
Honestly, I honestly forgot about Embiid, to be honest. But
that's what when I was thinking a while ago. That's the team I was thinking of where it's like you can't have 3 Nets on this list and have Embiid at 10. Without Embiid, they're a first-round exit.
Yeah, no. I was not even thinking about Embiid. I totally just forgot. And yeah, definitely not. I mean, definitely top 10, obviously. But yeah, I would say top 5. I mean, I think Jokic and Embiid should be top 5, and you could take Paul and Harden out of that top 5. So I think that's really what the list should be. But if you take Embiid off that team, their best player is, I mean, technically Simmons, but it's probably Harris scoring wise. So you're not, I mean, against Washington in the first round, are you making out of that first round? Yeah, probably. I think it's a tougher series than obviously with Embiid. And we did see when Embiid went out of one of those games, the Wizards did win. So I guess it would be a tougher series, but they wouldn't even come close to the conference finals, let alone the finals, if Embiid wasn't there. He's obviously their best player. You could say Simmons and Thibault are the best defensive players, but Embiid's a really good defensive player also. And he just takes that offensive load. He had 40 points in game 2 against the Hawks. The game 3 is happening right now, but he's probably killing it again. So yeah, I think he has to be way higher. I think he should be top 5.
Yeah, I have Embiid probably top 5 as well. And Giannis isn't on this list, but he should be. I mean, you agree with it too. Yeah. I probably don't have any Nets in the top 5, and it's not because Durant. I think Durant's probably the best player. He's definitely the best player left, and he might be the best player in the world. He really might be, but pure value is just I can't have a Net in the top 5. I probably have the Nets all 6 through 10, just because if you take one, the only way that hurts is pretty much in the finals. They're probably going to make the finals without. You could take any one of them out. They probably are the favorites to still make the finals. So at best, Durant is in that, to me, 4-5 territory. But yeah, I have Jokic in that top 5, Embiid in that top 5, Donovan Mitchell in that top 5, Giannis in that top 5. And then you can kind of start to talk. Maybe you put a Net in there. Maybe you put Trey Young or Devin Booker in there or Chris Paul in there. But yeah, I think overall, though, on this list, I think the only one he's really missing for me off the top of my head would probably be Giannis. Definitely Giannis. I don't know I don't know who else you would squeeze instead of like a Booker or Kyrie or somebody like that, but I think the list is pretty accurate other than Giannis. I would definitely switch up the order a good amount, but what's your take?
I think the one guy to take out would be Kyrie, and I think putting Giannis in. That'd be my only switch of guys who aren't on. But for order-wise, I guess for top 5, my top 5 I would still have KD there. I think even though I do somewhat agree that if you could take one of them out, they're still probably making the finals, most likely. So I guess that's like some away from it. But, KD is KD. It's just a different breed than what a Kyrie or Harden is, no matter how great they are too. KD, like we're saying, is arguably the best player in the world right now. You can't say that about Kyrie and Harden. So I think he's still in there. I think Kawhi's in there. Jokic, I think, is in there. Giannis, I think it's between Giannis and Mitchell, honestly. I think either of them could be that 5 spot to me. I guess even Jokic, you can kind of put all 3 of them in that same conversation. So I would have that as my top 5, and then whoever's not in that 5 is number 6. But again, I do agree with the list. I just think that you can take Kyrie out, put Giannis in, put Embiid higher, and take Paul and Harden out of that top 5.
I just don't understand how Chris Paul can be 3 and Booker can be 9. They should be back to back. I think they're equally as valuable on that Suns team. If not, Booker's slightly more valuable. But
do you think 7-8 for them?
I think probably 7-8, 6-7, 8-9, somewhere in that territory.
Yeah.
But I don't see how you can have that big of a difference between the two. I really don't.
Yeah, especially with
Chris Paul's like the gel of that team. He's what puts it together. He's the old veteran leader, and then Booker is the talent, if you want to call it that. He's young, he has a lot of grit, just like he's got that Mamba mentality. He's not necessarily the leader, the face of that team, but he's been on part of that team. He knows everybody on that team. He's by far the best offensive player on that team. So I think without either, they're not nearly as great. I don't think Paul is that much more valuable than Booker, if at all.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. I think they should be a lot closer. If again, like you were saying, if not right back to back. But again, overall, I think a pretty good list. Just some small changes, and obviously Giannis should definitely be in there.
I guess we will listen to what he has to say about Embiid, and if for some reason he brings anything up that justifies him being a 10, but.
This thing we have to Shaq, torn meniscus. He gets docked a little bit because he played great and couldn't beat Trey Young. That's why I put Trey Young ahead of him. Trey Young played great. Embiid played great. Embiid's got better teammates. Trey Young won. That's why he's ahead of him. Now, where's Giannis on this? Where do you want me to put Giannis? And I'm not anti-Giannis, but where do you want me to put him in terms of value? Late in games, none of these players late in games I feel are a liability. Giannis is with 4 minutes to go. Hi, everybody. Thanks for watching.
And I mean, I agree with that, and it's kind of what I was saying in the podcast that we did earlier. Again, go listen to that. But he's still a top 10 valuable guy because I definitely look value at that, last 4 minutes of the game, but also the first 44 minutes of the game. If he's not out there, they're not even close to being in that game. So I definitely factor that in a lot. So I think he's top 10. And the Embiid thing with, he was saying, him and Trey Young played, amazing in game 1 is what he was talking about, and the Hawks won. I mean, you can play great and lose. It's not like you have to win every single time you put up 35 points. So I just don't understand some of the arguments that he has. And I know that's somewhat what he does. He has dumb arguments that he just hammers home to piss people off. But I mean, some of these arguments that he's been making about the positions and where guys are just makes zero sense. And that one was another one.
Yeah, I don't understand that. That's just like grasping onto something and holding on to it. I don't agree with it. There's just too many variables to agree with that. But yeah, unless you have anything else to say.
No, I mean, this was fun to do. I mean, yeah, we're definitely going to do more of these. So I guess just look out for that on the Clips channel. This is where this will be. But yeah, that was definitely a lot of fun to do.
Yeah, but that's it. Appreciate everybody stayed to the end. Link to the actual channel will be in the description of the full podcast. Stay tuned on this channel, though. I'm going to try to do more stuff like this, 10, 15-minute, reaction clips, hammer them out, good, entertaining, but not, an hour long. Yeah, we'll be back. I guess there's not really a release schedule, but yeah, goodbye.